Darren Ingram didn't think twice before jumping into the freezing, rain-slicked street after the tiny, shivering puppy. The little thing had darted from the sidewalk, right into the path of an oncoming luxury SUV. Without hesitation, Darren lunged forward, scooping the puppy into his arms just as the car skidded to a halt inches from his legs. The driver slammed the door and sprinted toward him, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Oh my God, is he okay?" Her voice was breathless, panicked. Darren looked up, and for a moment, he forgot about the rain soaking through his already threadbare jacket. The woman standing before him was stunning long chestnut waves clinging to her rain-dampened face, piercing green eyes filled with worry. She was dressed in an expensive-looking coat, her makeup flawless despite the weather. "He's fine," Darren assured her, cradling the trembling puppy against his chest. "Just scared." She exhaled in relief, reaching out to take the puppy from him. But the tiny creature whimpered and curled deeper into Darren's chest. "I think he likes you," she said, her lips curving into a small smile. "Thank you for saving him. I don't know what I would have done if—" "It's nothing," Darren interrupted, shifting awkwardly. He wasn't used to people thanking him, let alone beautiful women who looked like they belonged on magazine covers. She studied him, her gaze flicking over his damp clothes and the worn sneakers on his feet. "You're soaked," she pointed out. "Do you live nearby?" Darren hesitated. He didn't want to admit that he barely had a home to go to. His apartment was small, barely enough for him and his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. "I'll be fine," he said. "Just take care of your pup." Before she could respond, he handed the puppy over and turned to walk away. "Wait," her voice stopped him. "At least let me buy you a coffee or something, as a thank you." Darren knew he should refuse. He wasn't the kind of guy who accepted handouts, but the rain was relentless, and the thought of a warm drink was tempting. "All right," he said. "Just coffee," she smiled. "There's a cafe around the corner. My treat." They walked side by side, the little puppy nestled in her arms. Darren tried not to notice how good she smelled, some kind of expensive perfume that made him think of warm vanilla and jasmine. Inside the cafe, they found a booth in the corner. She ordered 2 coffees and a croissant for the puppy, introducing herself as Genevieve Whitmore. "That's a fancy name," Darren commented, raising an eyebrow. She laughed. "I guess it is. My friends call me Jiggy. I'm Darren." He took a sip of his coffee, savoring the warmth. "So, Jiggy, what do you do?" She hesitated for the briefest second before answering. "I run a business," he nodded. "Must be a good one if you drive a car like that." She smiled but didn't elaborate. Instead, she turned the conversation to him. "What about you?" Darren exhaled. He didn't have much to impress her with. "I work construction, and I have a daughter, Lily." Her expression softened. "How old is she?" 6, smartest kid in the world. His face lit up just talking about her. "She loves animals. She would have lost her mind if I brought home a puppy." Genevieve's gaze lingered on him, something unreadable in her expression. "It's just you and her," he nodded. "Her mom left when she was a baby." "I'm sorry," Genevieve said softly. Darren shrugged. "It's life." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. For a moment they just sat there, sipping coffee, the puppy occasionally letting out a tiny yawn. Finally, Genevieve spoke. "I should get going, but Darren, thank you again." He nodded, pushing his cup away. "No problem." She hesitated before reaching into her purse. "I want to give you something." "If it's money, don't," Darren said firmly. She smiled. "It's not." Instead, she pulled out a sleek business card and slid it across the table. "Call me if you ever need anything." Darren glanced at the card. The name printed on it made his stomach drop. Genevieve Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Industries. He looked up at her, shocked. She grinned. "Yeah." Before he could say another word, she picked up her puppy, gave him one last lingering glance, and walked out of the cafe. Darren stared after her, the card burning in his palm. He had just shared coffee with one of the most powerful women in the city. And for some reason, he had a feeling this wasn't the last time their paths would cross. Darren stared at the business card long after Genevieve had left. The cafe buzzed around him, baristas calling out orders, the hum of quiet conversations, but his mind was stuck on the name printed on the sleek white card. Genevieve Whitmore, CEO. He had just spent the last 30 minutes drinking coffee with one of the most powerful women in the city, and she hadn't even flinched when she realized he was just a construction worker raising his daughter alone. She had looked at him the way no one had in a long time, not with pity, not with judgment, just curiosity. Shaking his head, he stuffed the card into his pocket and left the cafe. His shift started early the next morning, and he needed to get home to Lily. The apartment was quiet when he stepped inside. The heater rattled as it pushed out lukewarm air, and the dim glow of a nightlight flickered from Lily's bedroom. Darren shrugged off his damp jacket and peeked inside her room. She was curled under her thin blanket, her stuffed bunny clutched against her chest. He exhaled softly, relief washing over him. No matter how hard things got, Lily was his anchor. The next morning, Darren was back at the construction site before sunrise. The air was crisp, the scent of wet cement thick as workers milled around, setting up for the day. He fell into his routine lifting beams, securing scaffolding, wiping sweat from his forehead as the sun climbed higher. By midday, he had almost convinced himself that last night had been a strange dream. That is, until his foreman called out, "Hey, Ingram, someone's here for you." Darren frowned, dusting his hands on his jeans as he turned toward the entrance. His stomach tightened when he saw Genevieve standing there, a crisp navy dress hugging her figure, her hair swept into a low ponytail. She was completely out of place among the dirt and sweat-streaked workers, but she didn't seem to care. She lifted a hand in a small wave. "Hey," Darren wiped his palms against his jeans again, suddenly aware of how grimy he must look. "What are you doing here?" She shifted, as if debating her next words. "I owe you lunch. You saved my puppy, and coffee didn't seem like enough of a thank you." Darren glanced around. His crew was watching with open curiosity, whispering among themselves. His foreman raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "You really don't have to do that," Darren said. Genevieve smiled. "I know, but I want to." Something about the way she said it made it impossible to refuse. "All right," he said, pulling off his gloves. "Give me 5 minutes." They ended up at a small diner a few blocks from the site, not the kind of place he imagined someone like Genevieve would frequent, but she didn't seem the least bit uncomfortable as they slid into a booth. "I have to admit," Darren said, accepting the menu from the waitress, "I didn't expect to see you again." Genevieve stirred her iced tea. "I didn't expect to be here either, but I don't know, I haven't been able to stop thinking about our conversation." Darren raised an eyebrow. "Really?" She nodded. "You're different from the people I usually spend time with, and I don't mean that in a bad way, it's just..." She hesitated, then shook her head. "Never mind. Go ahead," he encouraged. She sighed. "Most of the people in my world care about what they can get from me. Business deals, connections, money. It's exhausting." Darren studied her. He had never considered what it must be like to be at the top, always surrounded by people who only saw dollar signs. "Well, I hate to break it to you," he said, "but I don't have anything to offer except a half-eaten granola bar in my pocket." She laughed, the sound warm and real, and something in his chest tightened. They talked through lunch, the conversation flowing easier than Darren expected. Genevieve asked about Lily, and he found himself telling her stories, how Lily insisted on reading bedtime stories to him, even though she often fell asleep mid-sentence. How she had once tried to adopt a stray cat by sneaking it into their apartment. Genevieve listened intently, her expression soft. "She sounds amazing." "She is," Darren agreed. The waitress dropped off the check, and before Darren could reach for it, Genevieve slid her card across the table. "Hey," he protested. She tilted her head. "I invited you." "That means I pay," he exhaled, shaking his head. "You're stubborn. I've been told." As they stepped outside, Genevieve hesitated, glancing up at him. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. If you could do anything, no limitations, what would you want?" Darren blinked at the unexpected question. "You mean besides making sure Lily has everything she needs?" She nodded. He ran a hand through his hair, considering. "I used to want to start my own construction company, not just build things but create something lasting," but he shrugged. Life happened. Genevieve was quiet for a beat, then she reached into her purse and pulled out a sleek black envelope. "Then maybe this is fate." Darren frowned. "What is it?" She handed it to him. "An invitation. There's a charity gala this weekend and I want you to come." He opened the envelope. The invitation was embossed with gold lettering, the kind of thing that screamed wealth and exclusivity. Jiggy, before you say no, just think about it, she interrupted. It's not just a party, there will be investors, business owners, people who could help you. Darren exhaled. This was insane, he didn't belong at a gala. But when he looked at Genevieve, he saw something unexpected in her eyes. Belief. And for some reason, that made it impossible to refuse. Darren adjusted the stiff collar of his borrowed suit, feeling more out of place than ever. The charity gala was held in a grand ballroom, its vaulted ceilings adorned with glittering chandeliers that cast golden light over the elegantly dressed crowd. Waiters in crisp uniforms wove between guests, offering trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that looked too delicate to be real food. He had spent the last hour convincing himself to walk through those doors. Genevieve had invited him, had looked at him like she truly believed he belonged here. But standing among men in tailored tuxedos and women draped in jewels worth more than his yearly salary, doubt crept in. Then he saw her. Genevieve stood near the center of the room, effortlessly commanding attention in a deep emerald gown that hugged her curves and shimmered under the chandelier's glow. Her hair was swept to one side, revealing the elegant line of her neck, and when she turned, her gaze locked onto his. A slow smile spread across her face as she made her way toward him. "You came," Darren exhaled sharply. "Barely." Her eyes flicked over him, not with judgment but with something close to admiration. "You clean up well." "I feel like I'm wearing someone else's skin," he admitted, tugging at the tie. She laughed softly. "Relax. You're here for a reason." Before he could respond, a man in a sleek charcoal suit approached. "Genevieve, darling, I was wondering when I'd get a moment with you." His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind that belonged to someone used to getting what he wanted. Genevieve's expression cooled slightly. "Victor." Victor's gaze slid to Darren, assessing him in an instant. "And who's this?" "Darren Ingram," Genevieve said smoothly. "A friend." Victor's smile was polite but thin. "Ah. And what do you do, Darren?" Darren met the man's gaze, refusing to be rattled. "Construction." Victor's lips curved in something that wasn't quite amusement. "Interesting." Genevieve's fingers brushed Darren's wrist, a silent reassurance. "Darren has an incredible vision for sustainable urban development. He's got ideas that could change the industry if the right people were willing to listen." Darren blinked at her, startled. He hadn't expected her to say that, let alone in front of people who actually had the power to make those ideas a reality. Victor arched a brow. "Ambitious." Genevieve's smile didn't waver. "Ambition is what built this city." Victor studied Darren for another moment, then gave a non-committal nod before turning back to Genevieve. "I'll see you later, darling." And with that, he disappeared into the crowd. Darren let out a breath. "Friend of yours?" "Hardly." She rolled her eyes. "Victor likes to think he owns everything in this room, including people." Darren shook his head. "I don't belong here, Jiggy." She stepped closer, her voice dropping just enough that only he could hear. "Yes, you do. You saved my puppy, Darren, but more than that, you're smart. You're hardworking. You have ideas that deserve to be heard." Something in her tone made his chest tighten. No one had ever looked at him like that before, not just with admiration, but with genuine belief. Before he could respond, another guest approached, pulling her attention away. Darren took the chance to escape toward the balcony, needing air. The cool night breeze was a relief against his overheated skin. He leaned against the railing, staring out at the city skyline, wondering how his life had taken such an unexpected turn. Running away, he turned to see Genevieve stepping onto the balcony, her expression teasing but gentle. "More like catching my breath," he admitted. She moved to stand beside him, her shoulder brushing his lightly. "I know this isn't your world. But that doesn't mean you don't deserve to be here." He glanced at her, searching her face. "Why are you doing this?" She hesitated, then exhaled. "Because you remind me of someone." Darren waited, sensing something deeper beneath her words. "My father," she finally said. "He started with nothing. Worked construction just like you. He built Whitmore Industries from the ground up." Darren's eyes widened. "I thought your family was old money." She shook her head. "People assume that, but my father was a self-made man. He taught me that real success comes from determination, not privilege." Darren absorbed that, realizing for the first time that maybe she understood struggle better than he had assumed. She looked up at him then, something vulnerable in her eyes. "I see that same determination in you." His pulse kicked up. For a moment, the noise of the gala faded, leaving only the space between them charged and electric. Then the doors opened, and a waiter stepped onto the balcony, breaking the moment. Genevieve cleared her throat. "Come back inside." "There's someone I want you to meet." Darren hesitated before nodding. As they re-entered the ballroom, he realized something had shifted between them, and for the first time that night, he wasn't sure if he was more afraid of not belonging, or of what he was starting to feel for her. Darren had never experienced anything like this before. The gala had been overwhelming, the attention unfamiliar, but nothing compared to the way Genevieve made him feel. As the night stretched on, she introduced him to investors, architects, and developers, people who would have never given him a second glance if not for her. But it wasn't just that she introduced him, it was the way she spoke about him, with conviction, with belief. As if she knew, without a doubt, that he was meant for something bigger. And somehow, standing beside her in a world that wasn't his, Darren felt something shift. By the time they left the event, the city had quieted. Genevieve's driver waited at the curb, but instead of stepping inside, she turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Come with me," she said. Darren hesitated, searching her face. There was something about the way she'd said it soft, sure, like she already knew his answer. Without a word, he nodded. They didn't speak much on the drive. The air between them was charged, filled with the unspoken weight of the night. When they arrived at her penthouse, Darren wasn't surprised by the luxury. He'd known she was wealthy, but seeing it up close was something else entirely. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering skyline, sleek furniture filled the space, and soft golden lighting cast everything in warmth. She kicked off her heels, sighing as she flexed her toes. "I love these events, but they're exhausting." Darren loosened his tie, watching her. "You seemed in your element." She turned, leaning against the counter. "It's a performance. You play the role, make the right connections, and hope no one sees through the act." Darren frowned. "Is that what tonight was, an act?" She studied him for a long moment before shaking her head. "Not with you." Something in his chest tightened. She stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking with every slow breath. "I don't do this," she admitted. "I don't bring people here. I don't let people in." Darren swallowed hard. "Then why me?" Genevieve hesitated, then reached out, her fingers brushing his. "Because you see me. Not the CEO, not the name, just me." Darren's pulse pounded. He lifted a hand, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers trailing along her jaw. "I don't know what this is," he said, voice low, "but I know I don't want it to end tonight." Her gaze searched his, something vulnerable flickering in her eyes. Then she closed the space between them, her lips brushing his soft, tentative, as if testing the waters. And Darren, he dove in. The days that followed unraveled everything Darren thought he knew about his life. Genevieve didn't just disappear after that night. She showed up, in small ways, in big ways. She asked about Lily, about his work, about his dreams. She listened. She cared, and Darren found himself falling. Hard and fast, in a way that left him breathless. One evening, as they walked through the city, Genevieve suddenly stopped in front of a quiet storefront. Darren followed her gaze, reading the sign, Kingston Development Firm. She turned to him. "I set up a meeting for you tomorrow." Darren blinked. "What?" "They're looking for someone with vision, someone with real experience in the field, not just numbers on a spreadsheet. I told them about you," she said. "They want to hear your ideas." His heart pounded. This wasn't just a casual favor. This was an opportunity that could change everything. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "I wanted to," she replied simply. Darren exhaled, shaking his head. "Why do you believe in me so much?" Genevieve smiled, reaching for his hand. "Because when I look at you, I see someone who refuses to give up, someone who fights for the people he loves, and that kind of strength, it deserves to be seen." Darren had never believed in fate. But standing there, with Genevieve looking at him like he was something more than just a man struggling to stay afloat, he thought maybe, just maybe, he had been wrong. The meeting was a success. Kingston Development wasn't just interested in his ideas, they were impressed. By the end of the week, Darren had a job offer, a real future. When he told Genevieve, she beamed, throwing her arms around him in an unguarded, joyful embrace, and in that moment, Darren realized something. He wasn't just falling for her, he was already in love. But love wasn't enough to erase the differences between their worlds. One evening, as they sat in her penthouse, Darren found himself staring out at the skyline, thoughts weighing heavy. Genevieve noticed. "What's wrong?" he sighed. Us, what are we doing?" she frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this isn't exactly an even playing field. You live in a world I don't belong in." Her expression hardened. "Don't do that. Don't act like you're not enough." Darren exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I just don't want you to wake up one day and realize I don't fit." Genevieve crossed the space between them, gripping his face between her hands. "You fit exactly where I want you." He searched her gaze, finding nothing but certainty, and just like that, the doubts faded. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were challenges, moments of doubt, whispers from the outside world. But through it all, Genevieve stayed. And Darren, he fought for her the way he had fought for everything else in his life, and in the end, love won, not because it was easy, but because it was real. Darren wasn't sure when exactly he stopped feeling like an outsider in Genevieve's world. Maybe it was the way she pulled him into conversations with confidence, as if she never once doubted he belonged. Maybe it was the way she looked at him when he spoke about his ideas, as if every word he said was worth hearing. Or maybe it was simply because, with her, everything felt right. But just because something felt right didn't mean life wouldn't test it. One evening, Darren arrived at Genevieve's penthouse to find her pacing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. The city lights reflected against the glass, casting a glow over her tense expression. He didn't need to ask to know something was wrong. When she turned, her gaze landed on him, filled with frustration. "It's Victor." Darren folded his arms. He hadn't seen Victor since the gala, but the man's presence had lingered, an unspoken force in Genevieve's world. "What did he do?" She let out a breath, her fingers tightening around the phone. "He's trying to push a merger through with Whitmore Industries, a hostile one. He's been buying up shares, convincing board members that I don't have the control I once did." Darren frowned. "Can he actually pull that off?" She hesitated, and that was enough of an answer. He stepped closer, his hands resting on her shoulders. "Tell me what you need." Genevieve's expression softened, but there was something guarded in her eyes. "You already do enough, Darren." "That's not how this works," he said firmly. "You don't get to carry this alone." Something in her gaze flickered, and then, for the first time since he'd walked in, she exhaled fully, as if letting go of the weight she had been holding in. "I have a plan," she admitted, "but it's going to be a fight." "Then we fight," he said simply. A small smile tugged at her lips, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You really think it's that easy?" "No," Darren admitted, "but I know you. And if anyone can take him down, it's you." Genevieve held his gaze for a long moment before finally nodding. The next few days were a whirlwind. Darren watched as Genevieve maneuvered through board meetings, legal battles, and strategic plays that rivaled any war. She was fierce, commanding, a force to be reckoned with. And despite Victor's attempts to corner her, she fought back with precision. Darren had always admired her, but seeing her like this completely in control, unwilling to back down, only deepened everything he already felt. Then one evening, she walked into his apartment, kicked off her heels, and collapsed onto his worn-out couch with a heavy sigh. "It's over," she said. Darren sat beside her, waiting. She turned her head, a slow smile spreading across her face. "I won." Relief crashed over him, but before he could say anything, she pulled him into a kiss, one filled with victory, with gratitude, with something deeper than words could express. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I couldn't have done this without you," he shook his head. "You could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." She curled into his side, her breath steadying, and for the first time in days, she looked at peace. And Darren knew, without a doubt, that no matter what came next, they would face it together. Months passed, and their lives intertwined in ways Darren had never imagined possible. Lily adored Genevieve, and Genevieve, despite her world of high-powered meetings and billion-dollar deals, always made time for her. One evening, Darren walked into Genevieve's penthouse to find her sitting on the floor with Lily, surrounded by colored pencils and sheets of paper. "What's this?" he asked, leaning against the doorway. Lily grinned. "We're designing a house." Genevieve held up a piece of paper with a childishly drawn blueprint. Lily has a very specific vision. There's a giant slide in the living room. Darren chuckled, stepping forward to press a kiss to the top of Lily's head. Sounds like an architect in the making. Lily beamed before returning to her scribbles. Genevieve glanced up at Darren, something unreadable in her expression. "Can I talk to you for a second?" He nodded, following her onto the balcony. The city stretched before them, glittering in the night. She turned to face him, her expression serious. "I've been thinking a lot about the future." Darren's heart pounded. "Yeah," she took a breath. "I don't want to imagine mine without you in it." His pulse kicked up, but before he could respond, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Darren's breath caught. She opened it, revealing a sleek band. "I know this isn't traditional, but I don't care about traditions." "I care about us." Darren stared at her, his chest tightening. "Are you asking you to marry me?" she finished. "Yeah, I am." He let out a breathless laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "You really don't do anything the normal way, do you?" Genevieve grinned. "Never." Darren reached for the ring, but instead of taking it, he pulled her into his arms, breathing her in. "Yes," he murmured. 1,000 times yes." She laughed against his shoulder, and when they finally pulled apart, her eyes were bright with something that made his chest ache. Lily's voice piped up from inside. "Did you say yes?" Darren and Genevieve exchanged amused glances before stepping back inside. "Yes," Darren told her. Lily squealed, throwing her arms around them both. "Does this mean I get to help plan the wedding?" Genevieve smiled. "Absolutely." And just like that, Darren realized something. His life, the one he had fought so hard to build, wasn't just his anymore. It was theirs, and he wouldn't have it any other way. The wedding was unlike anything Darren had ever imagined. Not because it was lavish, though it was. Not because it was filled with the city's elite, though they were there. But because it was real. Standing at the altar, waiting for Genevieve, Darren realized something. This wasn't just a moment. It was the culmination of every choice, every struggle, every impossible thing that had led them here. And then she appeared. Genevieve moved down the aisle with the kind of grace that made time slow. Her gown was elegant, simple yet breathtaking, fitting her perfectly. But it wasn't the dress that stole Darren's breath, it was her. The way her eyes found his, filled with certainty. The way her lips curved ever so slightly, as if she had never been more sure of anything in her life. For a man who once thought he didn't belong in her world, Darren had never felt more at home than he did in that moment. When she reached him, she took his hands in hers, her fingers warm against his. The world faded. It was just them. The vows were spoken, not scripted, not rehearsed, but real. Promises built on everything they had already been through. Darren's voice was steady as he looked into her eyes. "You changed my life in ways I never saw coming. You saw me when no one else did, and you made me believe in something bigger than just surviving. I will spend every day making sure you know just how much you mean to me." Genevieve's fingers tightened around his. "I have spent so much of my life looking ahead, always chasing something, always proving myself. But with you, I don't have to prove anything. I don't have to be anything other than who I am. You are my home, Darren. And I will love you for the rest of my life." There wasn't a dry eye in the room, not that Darren noticed. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Darren didn't hesitate. He pulled her into his arms, capturing her lips in a kiss that spoke of everything, of the struggles, of the triumphs, of the love that had defied every obstacle thrown in their way. The reception was a blur of warmth, of laughter, of champagne glasses clinking under the golden glow of the chandeliers. Lily danced between tables, twirling in a dress Genevieve had let her pick out herself, her joy infectious. At some point in the evening, Genevieve pulled Darren onto the terrace, away from the crowd. The city stretched before them, glittering and endless. "This is just the beginning," she murmured, leaning into him. Darren wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "Yeah," he said softly. "It is." Years passed, and life unfolded in ways neither of them could have predicted. Darren's company thrived, built not just on opportunity, but on the vision he had carried for so long. Projects that once felt impossible became reality: affordable housing developments, sustainable city expansions, things that made a difference. Genevieve continued to lead Whitmore Industries with the same strength and brilliance she always had. But now, there was balance. Now there were quiet mornings with coffee, weekends spent with Lily, late nights where work didn't come first. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their home, a home they had built together, Lily ran across the yard, her laughter ringing through the air. Genevieve leaned her head against Darren's shoulder. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" Darren glanced at her, his hand finding hers. "No," he admitted, "but I wouldn't change a thing." She turned to him, her gaze filled with something deeper than love, something unbreakable. "Neither would I." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting everything in a golden glow, Darren knew this wasn't just a happy ending. It was the life they had fought for, and it was only getting started.